The girl was on the brink of death, and to prevent her from turning into a zombie, her father picked up a screwdriver, ready to see her off on her last journey.
She's dying.
Don't touch her! No!
The couple were arguing, completely oblivious to someone cursing at them from behind. That person was Murphy, who had left Squad X and was preparing to lead his men to establish a hybrid nation. He didn't expect to run into these fools blocking the road with their car. Seeing no response from the people ahead, Murphy decided to get out of the car to teach them a lesson. At this moment, the couple were immersed in despair, unable to hear the honking behind them. Just as the man was about to make the painful decision, the door was suddenly opened with a bang.
Our daughter's dying.
Murphy saw the frail child and was reminded of his own daughter, Lucy.
Maybe I can help.
3 minutes later, Murphy drove off in the armored vehicle. The couple's faces were no longer filled with sorrow, and their eyes faintly revealed a glimmer of hope. Looking at Cassidy, her breathing gradually stabilized, though a bite mark now adorned her face. An hour later, the armored vehicle gradually stopped because Murphy saw a familiar place. He had visited this city many years ago, the site of the 1974 World's Fair, also known as the City of Lilacs, Spokane. What made it even more precious was the presence of a dam that could completely self-sustain by generating hydroelectric power. Therefore, Murphy decided to make this place his new home and the starting point for the hybrid nation.
Our new home. Spokane!
10K felt something was amiss. He agreed with everything Murphy said, which made him wonder if he was being controlled. But then, 10K saw the bite mark on Dr. Murch's face, and he had none on his own. Could it be that he was delusional? Then, as they approached the bridge for a closer look, Murphy grew even fonder of the place. The ceaseless flow of the river symbolized his booming enterprise. Next, he planned to establish a base here and have Dr. Murch develop a hybrid vaccine to gradually expand his nation. Murphy then called them to check out their new dwelling. 10K stood by the bridge, 100% sure something was wrong with his body. It was as if he naturally worshipped Murphy and obeyed his commands. Yet there was another voice inside him struggling. Perhaps everything would end if he jumped down.
Hypnotic, isn't it? Come on, kid. It'll be okay.
Eventually, Murphy chose the Riverside Museum as their base. They had thought it contained many usable items, but it had been plundered long ago, leaving only dust and a few mummified corpses. However, the rooms were large and numerous, offering great developmental potential. Murphy specifically selected one as a laboratory for Murch. One room with a blackboard could serve as his daughter Lucy's room. Murphy planned to send for the child once he had settled down. The room by the window would serve as his command post, offering a clear view of the dam outside. This place had natural advantages, ideal for farming and generating electricity. Now, all he lacked was manpower. Suddenly, a growling noise came from the staircase, and 2 soldiers rushed to investigate. Murphy's heart sank. He didn't feel zombies approaching, but instead, sounds of a fight emanated from inside. It turned out to be a wild man, already short on manpower. Now they had lost another soldier due to this accident.
What are you gonna do to him?
Shoot him.
Crazy? No.
I asked nicely. Shoot him.
10K didn't want to follow Murphy's orders to kill, but his hands still raised the gun. What's happening to him? Although the gun was empty, 10K indeed carried out Murphy's command.
Silly boy. Kids shouldn't play with guns. Even ones that aren't loaded. Somebody clean that up.
Now in power, Murphy showed no hesitation in deciding the life and death of others. Next, he began to worry about how to develop the hybrid nation. After all, people are the key to productivity. At that moment, Dr. Murch came in to report that someone wanted to see him.
Who is it?
The family with the sick little girl.
The road hogs? Send them away.
It was the couple they had encountered before. They came to thank Murphy, because Cassidy had recovered. What made the couple even more grateful was not just Cassidy's cure, but the fact that she no longer feared the apocalypse. A true miracle. As they were talking, Cassidy walked up to Murphy and sat on his lap as if she was reuniting with a long-lost relative. Then Will spoke with a pleading tone.
Would you bite my wife?
Hearing this, Murphy had an epiphany. His envisioned hybrid nation could indeed be a beacon of hope for the downtrodden. A week later, Roberta and the others were still roaming around. They had been looking for Murphy, with no clue where he might have gone. As they walked, they looked up to see a horrifying scene. Several zombies hung from the bridge above. The zombies' intestines had been pulled out from their bodies, trailing on the ground, creating a disturbing sight. Even more terrifying, the next bridge was densely packed with hanging corpses, causing even the experienced Squad X to shudder. Who could have done such a thing? They looked around and saw the word thieves written in large red paint on the walls. Could it be that these were living people killed and hung here? They were just discussing when suddenly the rope snapped and the 4 zombies fell down in turn. Fortunately, with only a few zombies, Squad X could handle them easily, except for Sun Mei, the newcomer with less strength, who was overpowered and knocked down by the zombies. Addie timely intervened. Hector took down a zombie with a headshot from his pistol, and Roberta showcased her signature move. Doc, wiping the blood off his face, took out his pistol and killed the last zombie. It seemed this place belonged to an organization. Using this method as a deterrent to strangers, Roberta decided it was best to leave. But just then, 3 armed men on the bridge aimed at them.
No! You come back to finish us off?
You get it wrong, brother.
You and every one of the Red Hand are gonna die for what you did here!
Upon hearing them, it was clear they mistook Squad X for something called the Red Hand. After seeing that the hands of the X team are not red, the 3 of them feel a little bit relieved. Then, the 3 approached Squad X under the bridge for a peaceful exchange. They had arrived here a few months ago because the area had few zombies and fresh water resources, making life quite comfortable. But 2 days ago, an organization named Red Hand arrived, led by a Scorpion, the second in command of the Zeros group. They committed arson, looting, and murder, leaving 1 survivor in each group they attacked. Marked with red as a warning, Roberta looked at the long-haired man, apparently the survivor they mentioned, and it seemed his tongue had been cut out. Hearing this story, Hector was the most dismayed. He had been with Squad X all this time. When did he ever establish the notorious Red Hand? Yet, he dared not reveal his identity, merely probing on how they were sure the leader was a Scorpion. The man bitterly stated it was because the person had a tattoo of a little boy on his arm, a well-known identifier. Hector became even more puzzled and did not continue the conversation. The 3 kept cursing the Red Hand incessantly, saying they planned to gather more people for revenge. But suddenly, Squad X hurriedly fled for their lives. They wanted to retaliate, but all they saw were bricks and Molotov cocktails. 10 minutes later, Doc and Sun Mei, supporting Addie, hid in a factory. The escape had been so hasty they got separated from Roberta and the others. They placed Addie on a table, and Sun Mei quickly checked but found no wounds. Only then did Addie reveal that it was her toothache causing unbearable pain. One misfortune after another. Fortunately, Doc had a bit of pain relief powder. He asked Addie to stuff a scarf soaked in it into her mouth to temporarily alleviate the symptoms. Suddenly, a loud noise came from outside. Doc peeked through the door crack, while Sun Mei looked out the window. It was Red Hand coming after them, and with that came a cloud of bricks and burning objects. They had to get out of there. That way! 5 minutes later, they went through several doors to the innermost room. It seemed the pursuers had stopped, but Addie's condition was not optimistic. Addie, in pain, began to drift in and out of consciousness, even starting to have a fever and irregular heartbeat, likely septic shock. They exchanged looks. The only option now was to forcibly extract the tooth. Meanwhile, Roberta and the others reached a residential area, seemingly the site of a previous battle, but they could not concern themselves with that now.
Wait!
Doc and Addie.
They went the other way.
After entering a house, they took out their weapons and looked around. It used to be a manufacturing plant, with children's toys scattered everywhere. As Hector walked, he suddenly tripped. Looking down, he saw bloodstains stretching into the interior. They moved past the obstacle and saw a woman covered in blood lying on the ground. Alive or dead, unknown. Hector first threw the woman's weapon aside to prevent any accidents. Afterward, Hector reached out to check the woman's pulse to see if she was alive.
Try not to move.
The Red Hand.
The woman's hands were red, clearly the Red Hand that the 2 men had described.
Are you with the Scorpion?
Estás con el Escorpión.
Instead of fear, the woman threatened them, saying that Red Hand had surrounded the area. She wasn't wrong. The pursuing Red Hand had arrived outside, armed with Molotov cocktails and bricks. Roberta, somewhat anxious, knew the wall wouldn't hold much longer. She curiously asked Hector when he had created Red Hand. Not even recognizing his own leader, Hector was more confused than anyone, suspecting someone was impersonating him, perhaps the remnants of the Zeros group. If so, they would immediately put Squad X in grave danger upon meeting. Worse still, they couldn't let those two men see Hector's tattoo, or they would be unable to clear their names. But for now, further discussion was pointless. They had to take things one step at a time. Roberta approached the woman to inquire what had happened here before.
Okay, justice for who? What happened?
Before the woman could answer, the two men finished checking the surroundings and came to join them. They immediately noticed the woman's red hands and were ready to claim justice.
Where's a scorpion? No! No!
Hey! What really happened here?
What?
Roberta was no fool. These two men clearly hid some details. Red Hand wasn't as murderous as they claimed. Squad X was clearly implicated by them.
How should I know?
They're crazy!
Everyone's crazy. Why are they crazy for you?
Those bodies hung like that. There's somebody sending a message. It's a warning.
Why they spray paint thieves?
They were somewhat guilty but still vigorously defended themselves. Roberta, running out of patience, directly pulled out her pistol and demanded answers at gunpoint.
They said we stole it, but that's our food, we found it!
Roberta realized these men had stolen food from Red Hand.
They killed for that food. Innocent people. Escorpion is the protector of the innocent.
So that was it. No wonder they were relentlessly pursued, and thieves was spray painted on the wall.
You'd kill me right now if it suited your purposes, and I'd do the same.
In the end, Roberta didn't shoot. She merely prevented them from harming the woman. Frankly speaking, this matter actually had nothing to do with them. Then, zombies broke through the small door.